All right, this is the Baltimore City Council Ways and Means Committee. We are getting started on fiscal year 2025 budget hearings. Calling to order Council Ordinance 24-0521, Ordinance of Estimates for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2025. Mayor Costello, Councilman from the 11th District, Chair of the Committee, joined to my right by Councilwoman Felicia Porter, 10th District. Also joined by staff to the committee, Nia Garrett, as well as representatives from the mayor's and the council president's office. First up today is the Department of Finance. We've also been joined by Councilwoman Odette Ramos, 14th District. Director, if you could, so you're up. If you could, before you start, introduce everyone on your senior team here that's here to testify. Full name and position title, please, and thank you. How long do you anticipate needing for your presentation? How long do you?
Should be between 10 and 15 minutes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Take it away.
All right. All right. Well, thank you so much, and good morning, Mr. Chair and council members. My name is Michael Moxton, and I'm the city's Chief Financial Officer and Director of the Department of Finance. With me today are Ioana Moisides, Deputy Finance Director for Operations, and Robert Sanami, Deputy Finance Director for Fiscal Strategy, along with the chiefs and bureaus of the offices making up the department. They are Carla Neely, Chief of the Bureau of Revenue Collections, Laura Larson, the city's Budget Director and Chief of the Bureau of Budget and Management Research, Adam Manny, the city's Chief Procurement Officer and Chief of the Bureau of Procurement, Victoria Raby, Acting Chief of the Bureau of Accounting and Payroll Services, Janelle Rogers, the city's treasurer and chief of the Bureau of Treasury Management, and Shanke Stanley, acting chief of the Bureau of Risk Management, and finally, Joanna Collado, head of the Fiscal Integrity Office. All right, are the slides on screen? Oh, thank you so much. All right, so this past year has been one of transformation for our department. In some places like procurement, it's a fundamentally different way of doing business for the city. And in other areas, it's more subtle, but equally important. I'll talk to you today about the strides we've made since I last spoke to you, and more importantly, what's to come. Those transformations come alongside a continued recovery from the tragedy of COVID-19 and the disruptions that came with it, as well as stabilization of the workday system and important progress on its implementation. Looking ahead to FY25, the goals of our agency are threefold. First, the timely and accurate processing of all financial transactions. Second, a level of customer service that is on par or better than our peers in terms of promptness, professionalism, and courtesy. And finally, sustained central support for every other agency as we go about conducting and improving the business of the city. You'll see these goals interwoven into the budgets and operations of our bureaus, which I will now walk you through. Our budget is organized by service areas. Most bureaus correspond to a single service with a couple of exceptions. BOP contains procurement as well as surplus property disposal and printing services, while BAPS contains both accounting and payroll. We begin our review with the Bureau of Revenue Collection. BRC is the largest component of the Department of Finance, and through its activities brings in the billions of dollars each year that the city relies on to fund all of our services. As we continue to recover from pandemic-related disruptions, this Bureau has made vast improvements in the past year in customer service response times. This includes reducing our call center request backlog by nearly 70% and bringing lean sheet turnaround times from a peak of 12 weeks at our worst just after the pandemic down to just 10 days as of today. We are able to achieve this firstly through stabilizing our workforce and filling vacancies. Indeed, in FY24, BRC has onboarded 10 personnel with another 5 in active interviews. We've also used internal resources to reclassify 11 positions in order to make them more competitive. At the same time, we've modernized our workflow with the use of electronic forms in lieu of paper where possible to trim process times. Looking ahead, the Bureau has embarked on the implementation of a new system to replace our aging and limited mainframe. Under the Tax Smart project, we will eliminate the need for tedious manual work on the back end, greatly reduce errors and misunderstandings, and fundamentally reshape the user experience on the front end, which will include payment plans. The project has been funded through our city's capital plan. The contract has been signed and work has begun. It will be completed in stages over the next 2 years. We next move on to Treasury. This was a good year for the city's Treasury operations. We took advantage of the timing of higher interest rates to deliver record earnings on the city's cash portfolio, which provided some much-needed relief to our overall budget. Some of this was good fortune, and we're mindful not to assume such returns forever. However, some of this was through purposeful calibration on the maturity of our investment instruments. The team has maximized what's possible under the city's existing investment policy, and we've been reviewing the policy itself in reference to state and national best practices. We'll be bringing forward recommendations this summer that could yield additional returns while keeping our principal safe. On the borrowing side, our general obligation credit rating remains AA with a stable outlook, which was recently reaffirmed by S&P, and this was after the tragic collapse at the Key Bridge, in light of the city's strong financial fundamentals. The Bureau's budget for FY25 includes $150,000 for advertising services needed for the next round of issuing. The administration service, we've built up supports to carry on our work in the rest of the agency. That includes bringing on an HR chief over the past year who's been instrumental in the staffing progress that we'll be talking about in other bureaus. We're currently also hiring for a citywide grants director and working closely with the CAO's office and the Office of Performance Innovation, working to strengthen the grant function across the city. Recently, we've embarked on a comprehensive review of the city's tax credits with a working group and private experts led by Deputy Mayor Williams and supported by Deputy Director Senemy. This is part of a larger effort to explore long-term resources and support long-term needs through an update of the city's 10-year strategy. Finally, we've partnered with the Department of Housing and Community Development, along with the Mayor's Office and our counterparts at the state level, to launch a vacant housing initiative that will, for the first time, address Baltimore's blight problem at scale throughout the city. The area of procurement has seen perhaps the biggest changes since I last spoke to you. Under the leadership of our new CPO, Adam Manny, as well as incredible support from the CAO, we've launched a comprehensive procurement transformation that's changing how we do business and how it feels to do business with us. The first step is proper staffing. In FY24, we will have brought on 9 people, with 4 already onboarded and 5 more starting in just a few weeks before the end of the fiscal year. These actions alone are increasing the Bureau's actual headcount by 35% in a year. An additional 4 positions are in interviews. Looking forward to FY25, the budget reflects a further enhancement of 5 new positions that will be focused on contract management as well as growing the P-Card program. All of this is allowing us to drastically reduce and redistribute workload, and that leads to faster turnaround times. With those people in place, we're also focused on training and professional development. 4 members of our staff have received professional certifications in the past year, more to come. Looking beyond just BOP, we have conducted 4 citywide trainings in recent months with over 250 total attendees. Soon, our procurement analysts will be organized into a team-based approach that corresponds to the agencies we're supporting. This will create permanent points of contact and build lasting knowledge. Concurrently, we're working with all of you on crucial charter amendments that will align our rules with similar jurisdictions and make use of national best practices in procurement to speed up the pipeline. In the service of surplus property disposal, the team ensures the timely auctioning of city assets that are no longer in use, bringing in a steady source of revenue for the general fund. There are no changes in this area for FY25. And in the area of printing services, we provide a professional central print shop for all agencies. There are no changes in this area for FY25. The payroll service, which is a part of BAPS, is seeing major changes. This team had fully turned over in the time after COVID, which led to a very difficult FY23, where we experienced errors and numerous corrections. We brought in outside help to stabilize the service and set to the task of rebuilding the permanent team. FY24 has seen a major turnaround, with nearly all processes running flawlessly and occasional discrepancies that stem from unusual and rare personnel actions being resolved quickly once they're discovered. In the meantime, we've onboarded 4 people in the past year, which includes payroll manager Kiara Tisdale, who joined us last summer and was instrumental in the stabilization, as well as deputy payroll manager Jamie Allen, who joined us a few weeks ago. Looking ahead to FY25, we are spinning down our consultant contracts and using a portion of the savings to fund 6 additional positions in payroll so that the knowledge we build becomes permanent. The accounting service area continues its development. It is yet another place where we had incurred significant vacancies during the COVID era, and which we're actively working to mitigate. In the past year, we have onboarded 4 people, including accounting manager Danae Moore, with 1 more person on the way before the end of the fiscal year, and 2 more positions after that in active interviews. In addition, under the leadership of our new acting BAPS chief, Victoria Raby, we're reviewing our organizational assignments and shifting from workers on temporary placement to permanent staff. The Bureau of Risk Management ensures that policies, procedures, and trainings are well executed around the city to keep all of our workers and residents safe. There are no changes in this area for FY25. The Bureau of Budget and Management Research works with all of you to inform and support the passage of a balanced budget that reflects the priorities of elected officials and all of our citizens. Under the leadership of Director Larson and her team, we have emerged from what started as a difficult year with a balanced proposal that doesn't rely on the kinds of layoffs or drastic service reductions that other cities have seen. We look forward to working with you in the coming weeks to finalize and pass this budget. There are no changes in this area for FY25. The Fiscal Integrity Office oversees the implementation of tax credits and ensures that all rules and regulations are applied fairly and equally to all who apply. There are no changes in this area for FY25. And the Finance Project Management Office provides technical assistance and change management support for our major technological implementations. There are no changes in this area for FY25. And I will now be very happy to take your questions.
Thank you. We've also been joined by Councilwoman Danny McCray, 2nd District Member of the Committee, Councilman Ryan Dorsey, 3rd District Member of the Committee, Councilman Isaac Yitzi Schleifer, 5th District Member of the Committee, and Councilman Mark Conway, 4th District. We'll go through committee members first. Councilman Schleifer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Director. Can you touch on a little bit where we are with lien certificates?
Absolutely. So there is a lot of progress in this area. As of today, we are down to just a 10-day turnaround time. We had initially experienced a peak back in 2022 when we'd lost a lot of the team. That got as bad as 12 weeks. We had gotten that down and stabilized for about a year. We experienced another peak in this past January when we saw higher volumes, and we added additional folks to that team to get that back down. So it's gone down from what was at one point this year a little bit over a month to just 10 days, which is just 3 days above our target time.
Gotcha. And so a couple times when we had those peaks, were they for the same purpose, or is there different reasoning behind those?
A little bit different. The first peak happened, I would say, around November of calendar 2022, so that was fiscal year 23, and that one was just the unfortunate timing of retirements. We had several people choose to retire around the same time, as sometimes happen when, folks know each other and they kind of go together. And that brought the team to a lower level of staffing than we had had it at before. We, at the time, dealt with it by moving folks around from other teams. It took a little bit of time to train everybody, but once everybody was in place, that's how we got it down the first time. The second time was more about volume. We were seeing more lean certificates come in January, and we think that these higher volumes are likely to be sustained. So we are now looking at a slightly higher level of staffing for that particular team being permanent.
And so is that in this budget to make sure that you have the resources you need to have that staffing?
It is implicitly because we made the changes within BRC's budget. Yeah, the current budget includes those changes.
Gotcha. So we should be good moving forward.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman McCray. Councilman Dorsey.
Thank you. Which of these service areas includes business licensing?
That is also in the Bureau of Revenue Collections.
Revenue collections. And do we have a specific figure that we can attribute to business licensing operations within the department, or within the service?
Meaning like how much we spend on it, or like staffing?
Yeah, yeah, how much you spend on it?
We can come back to you with that information.
When can you come back to me with that information?
I think just later today, right? Yeah, later this week.
This week?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, hold on. Mr. Chair, I have a request for the committee.
Go ahead. Margaret. Go ahead.
Can Finance please provide me a complete account of their costs associated with business licensing before the end of the day on Friday?
Can I ask why we needed this?
Because
I want to make sure your request is accommodated, but by call of business tomorrow seems, is there a?
they just said that they could,
Oh,
so
they
I'm just putting it on
did
the
say
record.
That's right. That's right.
If that's what you want to commit to, that's certainly your prerogative. By tomorrow, call of business. Very good.
Thank you, Councilman. I just want to flag that the city administrator has asked to review responses as they come back to council. So I just want to note that I don't know that we will be able to get it back by end of day tomorrow, but we'll work to facilitate that as quickly as possible.
Then I have a process question here, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
When I'm asking questions that are pertinent to my consideration of this budget, and I don't have a concrete timeline for when I'm going to have that before I'm asked to vote on the budget, what am I supposed to think?
I'm not going to tell you what to think, but what I heard Ms. Larson say is that she is concerned that they can't follow through on the commitment to have it by call of business on Friday. I didn't hear her say that we wouldn't have this before budget hearings are concluded. Is that correct?
That's correct. I believe we can get it next week. I just want to warn that would be end of day tomorrow, and I don't want to set an expectation that we can't meet.
That's right. Thank you so much, Director. And I apologize for being a little bit overeager. I think we can set the expectation that anything that we can deliver quickly in the way of additional information will run through our process and deliver next week. And anything that might take a little bit more time, I'll give you an estimate for.
So as we go through, I guess just questions for Dominic or someone from the mayor's office. So as we go through these requests, generally what we do is we ask an agency if they can have X information to us by Y date. And it sounds like there's a change to the process and that the CAO or the CAO's office needs to review each response from agencies to the council.
I can take this. So we worked closely with the council staff to figure out how we wanted to track and ensure that we're providing timely responses to questions. So the process that we're using this year is when there is a formal request like Councilman Dorsey just had, the request is being logged in a shared document that's being tracked by the Mayor's Office of Government Relations, my team, as well as the council team.
Aware of all that.
Yep.
I appreciate that. I guess the question is, who is the person that I'm going to be looking to tell me if they can meet a request by a certain deadline, because it appears that it's not going to be the agency.
So in the process that we've outlined, it will be the council staff who will be solidifying the formal request, and it's our understanding. So that will be led out of the council president's office, and so it was our understanding that probably like on a daily basis we would get the formal requests. And so in this case, we would likely get the formalized requests from the council staff tomorrow. And so what I'm saying is if we finalize the council request for the agency today, it's unlikely that they would be able to turn around the memo and provide the response by tomorrow. So I think in response to your question, Chairman, what I would say is when it comes to these deadlines, I think we have to sort of understand that there's at least a day lag in terms of us finalizing the request for the agency. And depending upon the data request, I would say that's where we would defer to the agency about an appropriate timeline to respond. This is I think a fairly straightforward response that folks will be able to resolve it and get back quickly. So I would say it's very acceptable that we would get back in sort of a 1 to 2 day response, but just understanding that the full list of requests probably won't be finalized until end of day today.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, Councilman Dorsey? Good.
Yeah, I think that response just speaks to, like you said, this is a simple request. Over the course of whatever our 8 or 9 days of budget hearings here, we're going to make requests for things that are, much more open-ended. What would it cost you to create a thing to do a certain thing, and how soon could you have that thing up and running, versus how much are you spending on this thing right now? And I feel like asking how much are you spending on this thing right now is something that an agency should be able to respond to and not have to, go through too much rigmarole in order to be able to provide us that kind of information. So, I guess maybe the question is, will finance provide that information to the CAO by close of business tomorrow?
We will make sure that the information gets to the council in a timely way. I agree that this is an easy question, and there will be hopefully lots of easy questions. We like easy questions, and that those can be done quickly. And 9 times out of 10, that's all there is to it. 1 time out of 10, it turns out there was something unexpected, and we want to make sure we get you the right information. So in the case of a question like this, we will move very quickly internally, and as Director Larson just said, we'll get the council the information on those quick turnaround questions in just a couple of days.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that I'm glad that we've established some sort of baseline understanding for all of us about process here at this point. I do have one other question for the agency. Which service area includes issuance of refunds to people who have overpaid the city for different things?
Good morning, Ioana Mositas. The issuance of refunds is actually typically a 2-part process, and it's actually one of the areas that we're looking at for process improvement. So the Bureau of Revenue Collections receives the request for refunds. They review, I'm going to say, I always say it wrong, release or process, and then BAPS will issue the refunds. BAPS is the Bureau of Accounting and Payroll Services. What we are looking to do, and this is, the director referenced subtle transformations, the things that people don't really see behind the scenes. What we discovered historically is that the process was separated into 2 parts, as part of what we think was likely an internal controls systems issue. In other words, the system couldn't provide adequate information and double checking, and so people separated out the process into those two segments. Now, we do have some new leadership. Acting Chief Victoria Raby, and the first thing that she asked when she got there was why. And why is an incredible question. It's probably the question I've heard most from her, but it's been a learning process in the short 2 months she's been there. So we've identified that there is a delay at times when it goes over to BAPS and their ability to review. We have had tentative discussions between our two bureaus and identified staffing that would move from one bureau to the other. And then what we're working on now is developing what are the criteria. In other words, before there was that two-part check between two parts of finance, ensuring that we have adequate financial controls, that we have the SOP developed. And so we're looking at that and I hope that both chiefs don't nudge me in the back of my head, but we're looking in June and July to transfer that function. As part of that, I think it's also important to note that some refunds occur as part of like the property tax system. And so when we're talking about that new tax system, a piece of what we're talking about is being able to readily see what someone owes the city. And I can tell you that in processing refunds and looking at, was a real property tax bill paid? Are they due a refund? Were there any subsequent or prior bills? Right now, staff have to look through multiple screens. So I can, staff can, and Chief Neely can't go into the system and say, for this property, 1100 Washington Boulevard, what taxes are owed? You have to look at the prior years individually. You don't see one bill. You don't see one set of payments. And in fact, what you see is, and many of you have seen it when we've sent responses and you get the screenshot and the inevitable answer is, what is this telling me? With that new system, we'll be able to more clearly see what's owed. That means we cut down on that research time.
Yeah.
So I hope that addresses part of your question.
It does. I hope that it addresses, when I hear from a constituent about them being owed a refund, 9 times out of 10, I have been told that I'm owed this refund. The city has acknowledged it and assured me that it is being issued, and I've been following up with them for 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 months, and it has still not been issued to me. And when I get involved, it's issued within like 2 days. And so I don't understand where that that breakdown is. And if you're telling me that we're going to fix that problem, I guess my next question is, this is not something that I'm putting in a service request through the 311 system for, so I don't know that there's a timestamp for when the process is initiated, and there's a service request delivery period that we're expected to deliver on 3, 4 days, 9 days, whatever that period of time is. Have we set, or are we setting a reasonable length of time for the issuance of refund from the first time that somebody is contacting the city about it until the check's in hand?
So that is, so we have a service level, I believe, and Chief Neely can speak to it, but we want to revisit those. I think the service window, particularly with the new system, there should not be that time period, so that's one. 2, we also want to set a baseline for where are we at now. And if you can imagine that the reporting, so we would think that you would be able to go in the system and see cumulatively all of the refund requests that came over. You can't. It's actually a daily report that are separate reports. So once that report runs, you have to get the next report. So you have to pull those together, and it is a legacy system report. So one of the parts of the project is an accurate baseline on, plain and simple, where are we at now? Then with the guidelines for where do we want to be? And then identifying the criteria. We have some thoughts on the criteria for priority in terms of how we address both the backlog, but the new stuff coming in at the same time. That's going to take some work to see how we can do both, right? Because we don't want the people that have been waiting to wait longer, and they're waiting longer just because nobody's escalated it. That's not right, clearly. But we also want to ensure that we're beginning to bring that new stuff up to speed.
Thank you, and I apologize, I have one last related,
Is this directly related to that?
yes,
Like 100% directly related?
directly related to
Thank you,
issuance
please
of
proceed
refund.
as
I
officially.
was angrily berated by a constituent 2 weeks ago who was unequivocally owed a refund because of a bad water bill for $5,000 that he paid just in order to get himself out of tax sale, and then later proved was a bad water bill. And so he should have been refunded that money. And he was denied a refund and instead issued a credit onto his water billing account. So now he's just spending down $5,000 of a credit instead of having that money in his hand right now, as he duly should. Is this a decision that somebody makes?
So that's a decision that the agency, DPW, so the issuer of the bill, would make. So we can, if you can send, or I don't think it should be part of the council
I don't
request.
think
If
I
you
ever
can
want to speak
just-
to this man again. I
if
just
you-
want to know
yeah,
about
if
it,
you-
so.
Yeah, in an instance like that, if you send it to us, what we would do is work with DPW. And obviously, they have rules and guidelines for how they apply credits, et cetera.
Okay.
They're the subject matter expert for that. I will say that if we have questions about that, that we will also advocate and work with them if circumstances warrant.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Conley? Councilwoman Porter?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director, I wanted to ask about Section 698, the Fair Elections Administrator. Who does this person report to, and what is the structure of recouping those funds for the Fair Election Fund?
Absolutely. Do you want to take this one as well?
Good morning, that's me. So the Fair Election Fund Administrator was a newly created position. Under the establishing legislation, the Director of Finance administers the program, but in coordination with the co-decision making of the Fair Election Fund Committee. It is a different role than finance, right? Because it's not, you can't just do a spreadsheet to account for the fund. You also have to, because this was newly created, work with MOGR and law to establish the committee, meaning, make sure that everyone's nominating the members, make sure that the members are brought in, that they have the information they need, setting up the website. Our Fair Election Fund Administrator is actually, wave your hand, Nadine O'Lanaran. She has been an incredible member of finance and did all of the groundwork for that. It's obviously, as anyone who watches the news would say, a very interesting season because we are one of the first jurisdictions, I think we're the third jurisdiction in the state to adopt a fund and create one. So the process is new overall for many jurisdictions in the state, and I'm pleased to say that Nadine invited me to a meeting yesterday where they in fact said that we've encountered some of the most novel and groundbreaking questions this election season. So with the fund, I'll give a few, if it's okay, a few high-level details. The commission has been established. They have been meeting. They're very active. This season, I believe there were 6 candidates and about 1.137 million dispersed. There is the letters have already gone out to the candidates who were, the letter has already gone out to the candidates notifying them of the process post-election if they are not successful, how to return the funds, where to return the funds.
Wonderful.
The very basic information. And I'll note Nadine was really incredible. This was such a brand new process. We had to figure out how to get the candidates' funds registered in Workday, get them familiar with the process. It really went seamlessly due to her hard work, the support of the law department, and of course the commission. We do have, and this is where we really rely again, behind the scenes work that happens every day. The State Board of Elections was incredible both in providing the guidance on setting up the fund. They meet with Nadine, I believe, weekly or bi-weekly, and then during the election season, weekly, and more recently, probably every other day. So we have some open questions related to disbursements and return that the commission is working through. Finance tries to handle the administrative-only portions, but the substantive decisions of what do we want the fund to look like, and those kind of more substantive policy decisions, we try to sit solely with the commission. And then I'll just note, as part of the commission's summer work, they anticipate taking up the process of, okay, now that we've gone through this first cycle, what are the things that we need to change or articulate more clearly? And so that will be, I am hearing from the commission, a good part of their work coming up.
Thank you. Is there a timeline on when those funds should be returned to the city from candidates?
I should know because I looked at the letter. Did you want to come? Would it be okay?
If you can come to a podium, ma'am.
Oh, you have to go to the microphone.
Yeah.
And press the. Thank you.
Thank you. And welcome.
Good morning. My name is Nadine O'Lantern, Department of Finance.
You gotta come closer.
My name is Nadine O'Lantern, Department of Finance, Fair Election Fund Administrator. Disbursements will begin 30 days after certification. We
Perfect.
currently have an issue of recount, and to Ioana's point, we are still in the process of working with the law department to get defined terms
Perfect.
for that phase. But for those candidates that have not definitively been successful,
Yes.
their disbursement period will begin 30 days after certification.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. Mr. Chair, are we allowed another question, or is it 1 to 2 questions? 2? Yes, sir. For Section 700, well, no, I'm going to go to this one. Sections 708, the operating budget management. The number of residents that you all targeted for FY25 to be engaged in the budgetary process is 5,000. Can you share why that number is so low, given that that's less than 1% of our overall total population here in the city?
So obviously, we want that number to be as high as possible. The fiscal 25 target is in line with what we have seen from actual performance in recent years. What I can say is this is an issue that we've really leaned into over the last year. We've created a community engagement analyst whose sole responsibility is to engage with residents around the budget. One of the things that we're really trying to do with that role is expand our engagement outside of budget season. So typically we'll have a lot of forums with residents in the winter months and in the spring months that sort of coincide with releasing the budget. But what we want to do is shift to more of an ongoing conversation with the community. So we're not just going out once a year and saying what's important to you and then disappearing for a year and then coming back in a year and asking the same question. And so one of the things that Kira's been able to do in her role is establish connection with different community groups across the city. She's looking to broaden that even further in fiscal 25. We've also stood up a newsletter that goes out to residents on a bi-monthly, like twice a month, where we're giving updates about key things that are happening within the budget process as well as citywide. So it's my hope that we will continue to see that number grow as we are able to expand our reach through those efforts.
So the only reason why I asked that question is because we just came off an election cycle where, the candidates and elected officials alike were using non-traditional forms such as text messaging, different polls, through email, TV, different things of that nature. I'm hoping that we can truly get a more participatory budgetary process that engages those non-traditional forms that are really kind of low-hanging fruit, and they are cost-effective kind of to increase this number as well. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Certainly, and I'll say on that topic too, we are open to any and all suggestions about things that you see that work really well with your constituents. So please feel free to share any of those ideas with me.
We've also been joined by Council Vice President Sharon Green Middleton. Council Vice President, any questions? Councilman Schleifer, I'll come back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I apologize for my tardiness. And I'm not sure if my question is similar to what my colleague, Councilwoman Porter, had just talked about, but, this is about, I guess, constituent complaint as well. And one of the main complaints that I continue to get in my office is receiving rightful payment due to tax assessment reduction, or employees not receiving back pay because of system error. So as we advocate on behalf of our constituents and also employees, is there a process in place where these errors can stop? I know you had mentioned getting out a newsletter or things through email, but it seems like we need to take it a little deeper, like sending a mailing or doing something to, I guess, correct the error.
Yeah, so just want to clarify, the efforts that I was just highlighting are really focused around engaging the community around the budget and what are priorities in the budget, but also communicating different education about the budget, so residents know how to be informed and provide feedback and be engaged around the budget. I'll defer to the director and some of my colleagues for how to address some of the specific issues regarding employee payroll and some tax billing issues for residents.
That's right. And Madam Vice President, thank you for the question. It is very important for us to fix issues when constituents have a problem with them. I think we heard a couple of different examples just now. One you had mentioned was employee payment and back pay, and of course city employees are constituents just like anybody else, and we want to make sure we get it right. On something like that, there is, of course, a process in place with the employee's own agency, and we in central payroll support those agencies. We know that there's been disruptions that I talked about in my opening statements in the last couple of years when central payroll lost a lot of staff after COVID, and we struggled at times with getting back pay right. There's been a lot of progress since that time. We are seeing folks paid correctly, even with complex adjustments, correctly, on time, every time, almost all the time. And we understand that sometimes issues will happen. But my office ultimately is responsible for that. Reaching out to me directly is always an appropriate mechanism for those extremely unusual exceptions, that 0.1%. And the 99.9%, we have an expectation on ourselves to pay folks correctly. And I think I heard you mention things like refunds as well. And we spoke
Correct.
to some of that earlier with Deputy Moisides' answer. And most of the time, we get it right. In the area of refunds, we have had particular delays that we are aware of, and we are very actively working to speed that up, basically to make sure that folks never have the question to begin with. But in the meantime, if issues come up on finance operations, ultimately reaching out to the Department of Finance, either to the Bureau or to me directly, is always appropriate, and we're here to help support you in answering any questions that your constituents might have.
Thank you. And your office has been good with, as we get individual concerns, and you work on that right away. I guess it's just important that, you know, as you enhance your, the work that you're trying to do to stay up to date with constituents, that we as council members stay in the loop as well.
Absolutely, and we'll keep coming back to you and updating you on the changes and the improvements that we're making. I really look forward to working with you.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Conway, and then Councilwoman Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate you guys, appreciate the work you guys do, and I know you guys are going to be really busy during this budget process, so kudos in advance. Want to give a shout out to one of my former interns that now works in your department, Kira McDonald. She is phenomenal. I hope she's enjoying her time there. I wanted to ask a quick question about Service 148, revenue collection, with regard to the percentage of service requests close on time. What kind of service requests go to this service? What are some of the things we see?
So this would be through the call center. Carl, do you want to? Yeah, go ahead.
Good morning, Carla Neely, Chief, Bureau of Revenue Collections. Pretty much any call that you can think of, a question about a parking ticket, why did I get the parking ticket? I have my real estate bill, I can't find a copy of it, can you send it to me? I'm due a refund. I'm a resident of Washington, D.C., but I got a ticket, but I can't find it. So when you say service request, almost everything that you can think of when it, pertains to any bill that the city may send out.
Okay. That's very helpful. I noticed the percent close on time, we're pretty far from our target. We lowered the target in 2025. Can you give me a little bit of insight on why that is?
One is, of course, staffing. So you have to staff up, and unfortunately, we have mainly entry-level positions, and so there's constant movement of bringing someone, training them, and then moving them out. Two, it was a very aggressive target that I set. Unfortunately, we didn't quite make it, but again, I shoot for the stars and we do the best that we can. So that's number two, some of my own aggressiveness. And lastly, just the sheer volume. There was a study done that our call center should have approximately 43 on staff. We pretty much have between 15 to 18. So it's just sheer volume of just getting through things. And then the call center is where the request starts. But it doesn't end there. They're just taking the request. And then those service requests have to be farmed out to the parking area, the Department of Public Works, just different agencies around the city where we're the first phase, but we're not the last phase. And so we also have to depend on other agencies to respond to us to be able to get back to the customer. And then some of our internal departments are short-staffed at the time, and so we're still rebuilding our team. Again, we lost a lot during COVID, a lot of early retirements and just turnover because, again, this is an employee's market, not an employer's market when it comes to positions.
Got it. And for clarification, what is the on-time designation? Is there like
each type of service request is a little different. So some are 14 days, some are 21 days, some are 30 days. It just depends on the service and how complex it is to get a final response or resolution.
Got it. Thank you. And then my second question is a broader question. I know we were working with regards to procurement on some charter amendments to really re-envision procurement for the city, knowing we have a number of challenges there today. Can you give me an update on where we are with that charter amendment and the recommended changes?
Absolutely. I'll pass it to our procurement chief for that.
Good morning, Adam Manning, your Chief Procurement Officer. We have been working with the City Administrator's Office and the Solicitor's Office to bring those forward. We're looking at doing several charter changes. The first one is the majority of it is to remove procurement from the charter and have everything going into a new set of procurement regulations, which will be approved by either this board or the Board of Estimates as we move forward. The other large ask we're asking for is in the charter. There are thresholds for procurements. The city's thresholds compared to other major cities and best practices are very low, and we are asking to increase those thresholds. With the increased thresholds, it would change the workloads of our senior staff. allowing them to focus more on the high-volume, high-dollar items, and we would be able to then have the lower-dollar items handled by contracting officers, which would then continue to balance out the workload. Those are the two large asks.
Do we have an estimated timeline for when we might expect to see some of those things in writing?
No, sir.
And then finally, do we have a deadline in order to make sure that it ends up on the ballot in November?
I don't have the answer to that, sir. That was the city administrator's office and the solicitor's office were handling that.
I want to make sure we get you the right information, because I can say with great certainty we will get it on the ballot. I don't remember all the dates off the top of my head, but we can come back to you with those dates.
I'll make that a formal request, if that's okay, that we get the formal dates in order to get this added to the ballot, and then an estimated timeline to make sure that the council has sufficient time to review those changes before we are asked to vote on it.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you. I noted the chair has walked out, so I'm going to go down the line. Councilwoman.
Over here, to Odette. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have several questions, but I'll just start with these. First, I do want to say thank you all for all you've been doing. I know you answer all of my emails, and it's been great and very timely and have resolved a lot of issues. The call center issue certainly is a big one, because if people can't get through, they do come to us, and then you get our emails. So the more we can work through that, that would be super. My first question is, I want to stay on Service 148 revenue collection. There are some typos here, so I just want to make sure that we're looking at the right thing. Average call center wait time in minutes probably shouldn't be 700. So what is that going to be, and what is the target there?
We apologize for the typo. I know exactly the typo you're talking about. It got converted to a percentage. That is meant to be 7 minutes.
And Councilwoman, I will note, we updated the online version of the budget book, and so if you look at the online version for this service, the performance measures have been corrected.
Great, thank you. Appreciate that. I want to go back to the topic you hear from me all the time, and I want to understand better about the tax payment system. And you had mentioned that it would be implemented within the next 2 years. Does that also mean that payment plans for people who want to pay either in advance or in arrears is going to be implemented in 2 years?
Yes, Councilwoman, that does mean that, and we are very excited about it. We are looking to do a lot of things with the new tax system. We're calling the whole project Tax Smart, and we will loop you into the project as it develops. We are going to change the entire interface for what it looks like to work with the city. And we've been doing a lot of research on payment plans as we've worked with you over the past year to figure out the best way to implement them. And Tax Smart is the fastest and really the best way to get payment plans to the city of Baltimore. So we're very much looking forward to that.
So 2 years is when we'll be able to offer that, because my bill passed in 2021, by the way. So
Understood.
I want to make sure that this happens.
Could I define, I'll define the timeline a little bit more, because it's a phased approach. Thank you, Chief Neely. So the real property, think of it in 3 phases: real property, miscellaneous taxes and self-reported, and then personal property. The timeline as it stands now is that real property implementation, we're working on that now, so you can say April 2024 with an anticipated go live of August 2025. So the payment plans, we do have a soft launch day, but I will say that we anticipate that payment plans will be available by October 2025. So that is the first phase. In the second phase, then, we expect self-reported taxes and miscellaneous taxes to be available by January 2026, and then followed by personal property.
Okay, that's a little better, thank you. I appreciate that and look forward to working through that with you, because we do have a lot of residents that are in arrears and would like to pay in a payment plan, particularly, given the situation in the last few years. So I definitely appreciate that. And just one note on the system, I want to make sure that, and I believe I sent an email about this, that the screen that is seen is a cumulative screen. So right now, you can only see 3 years. And so if Ms. Jones, I'm just making this up, although scenarios like this have happened, if Ms. Jones, didn't pay something 10 years ago, we're not seeing that. And so she doesn't know, especially if she can't get online, or can't get through to the call center, that was happening. And so Ms. Jones has this horrible, huge bill, and that becomes a problem. So I want to make sure that we're seeing cumulatively, what the balance is due and what the cumulative balance is. That would be super helpful. I also know that there are privacy concerns with seeing so much online, and I want to make sure that we're protecting our residents, but also we need access to the information online so that we can help our constituents. So having that balance is going to be important.
And I want to note that this is not the only opportunity you'll have to share this. So we
Of course.
do have a council demo in works, and then we have stakeholder plans and that includes the public, right? Because ultimately, we want our end users, our homeowners, our neighbors to be able to access the system in ways that is useful and available and accessible to them. The project structure of this, I think the city has done a phenomenal job, again, with thanks to the administration for their support, and CAO Leach. We have an executive governance board. We have our project leads. So Dorothy Reed, who many of you are familiar, the deputy, will be devoting a significant amount of her time to be able to be the functional lead in this project. So many of those things you named are actually on the list, but we want people to provide that feedback, and there will be opportunities for council as well as the public to do so.
Thank you. I'll yield. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Larson wanted to come back to the question that Councilman Dorsey had.
Yeah, Councilman Dorsey, you had questions regarding the cost of business licensing in the Bureau of Revenue Collections, and I just wanted to note our team had done some analysis regarding that team as part of our bill response to 230347, the creation of the Business Licensing and Consumer Protection Office. So based off of our cost analysis from fiscal 24 that was performed last fall, the staffing costs for that office were about $570,000, and there was less than $100,000 of non-personnel expenditures included for that team in fiscal 24. The fiscal 25 budget maintains the current level of service for the team, so the only adjustment there would be any changes for staff costs or benefits or things like that. But in total, the estimated cost of the office would be about $650,000.
Thank you. Oh, and also, Mr. Chair, I have a response to one of Mr. Conway's questions, if that's all right.
We're good on the Dorsey one? Okay, Conway.
Councilman Conway, on your question about procurement charter amendments, we have actually submitted charter amendments right now to the Council President's office, where they're being reviewed, so they are on their way. And once the Council President completes the review, they'll move to the next stage.
Thank you. We've cycled through everyone once, correct? Okay, we'll go back to committee members. Vice President McCray, Dorsey, okay, Conway, Porter.
For Section 710, fiscal integrity and recovery, how long has this committee been meeting, and when is a report due to the council for review? for fiscal integrity. You mentioned looking at or overseeing the city's tax credits. Is that report coming to the council? Yes. Sorry.
Yes, no, absolutely. There is a tax credit working group that launched early in the calendar year of 2024. I'm going to pass it to Deputy Director Senemy to speak more about that.
Thank you.
Hi, good morning. So the tax credit work group kicked off earlier this year. We have met 3 times already. There's a total of 9 sessions that are scheduled, so we expect it to wrap up sometime at the end of this calendar year.
Okay, perfect. And the report will be to the council in FY25 or early next year?
Yeah, so if our group wraps up our deliberations in this calendar year, we would expect early next calendar year to kind of deliver our final recommendations to the council.
Yes, ma'am.
Yep. Can I add additional
Yes, ma'am.
clarification? So the tax credit working group is actually a part of the 10-year financial plan, which you'll hear a little bit more about from me later today when I testify.
Okay.
And the recommendations will be folded into the 10-year financial plan recommendations.
Okay, thank you.
Conway?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to ask a question about Service 710, the Fiscal Integrity and Recovery Service, and just a note about one of the outcomes, the one specifically noting the dollar increase of property tax revenue attributable to successful appeals. I noted that was going up, which is really good. Can you give me a little bit of background on what's going on there? I know we have historically had issues with assessments of properties being far too low, then resulting in tax revenue from those properties being far too low. Can you just give me a little background on what's going on there and why we're seeing it go up and why we have increased our target?
Absolutely. And there's a lot of work going on to make sure that assessments are correct. Of course, we're also seeing some volume increases as well. I'll pass it to Joanna Collado to answer the rest.
Can you hear me? No. How about now? Is that better? Joanna Collado, Director of Fiscal Integrity. The assessment increase has been due to an increase in the number of assessment appeals that our office have submitted over the years. As you all know, it takes the State Department of Assessment and Taxation a significant amount of time to assess properties. So we keep track of all the new construction that has been done in the city through looking at permits, and then we submit assessment appeals to the State Department of Assessment and Taxation. Additionally, when we see that the assessments are understated based on recent sales, we also submit appeals to the Department of Assessment and Taxation. And once those are heard, arrested, sometimes it can be denied or it can be approved. If it's denied, then we go to PTAP to try to increase the assessment.
That's great news. Really happy to hear that we're doing it. And I have 2 questions as a result of that tie exactly to that. One, are we seeing more appeals? And how many more appeals? And then the other consideration is, are we leveraging our permit data to see improvements to properties such that we can improve our tax revenue?
The response is positive for both.
Your microphone's not on.
I'm sorry. Yes, so we have seen, we have submitted a greater number of assessment appeals. That's why the results is higher as well. And can you repeat the second question, sorry?
Permit data. So when people make improvements to
yes,
their
we
home.
get all the permit data at the beginning of the year, and we look at all the permits that have been pulled for the group that is being reassessed. And based on the analysis of that data and the current assessment, we submit appeals to the Department of Assessment and Taxation.
That's phenomenal news. And later on in the budget process, we'll talk about permits, but these all go together. If we want more revenue for the city, we got to get people to use permits, and then we got to make sure we hold them accountable to the increases in their property. So thank you guys, great work, and love to see more of it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Ramos?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One follow-up on that point. One of the things we figured out during tax sale season was that people were getting these mid-year assessments bills, and they weren't getting to their mortgage companies. And so we had a lot of people ending up in tax sale or on the tax sale list because they were getting this bill that a lot of times they thought was a mistake, or the mortgage companies never got it. And so I'm wondering, first of all, is this with the city sending appeals to to SDAT? It sounds like that's not a new thing, but this mid-year piece ended up being something that was a real challenge. So can we talk a little bit about how that's going to be remedied moving forward?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. I'm going to start it kind of at a high level. The mid-year appeals are not new, but SDAT was, like many other entities, also very backed up during COVID, and things had just slowed down and piled up. So this past year saw a number of mid-year reviews, basically just from a catch-up that SDAT was doing, and I think that's what started kind of generating a lot of questions. Now, mid-year reassessment is just like any other assessment, and a mid-year reassessment, of course, doesn't mean that you immediately get sent to tax sale, nor should you. You should get proper notice, and most constituents do, and then time to pay the bill, and then if the bill is not paid, then like with any other unpaid bill, it kind of goes to the next December where we start sending out final notices and preparing for a tax sale in stages that comes in the next spring. So the way the system is designed, there's meant to be a lot of time. What we heard this year that would definitely cause some concern for me in my office is that people just weren't seeing these bills. Not a lot, but in the grand scheme of things, but enough to be concerning. And we are researching what the causes for that might be. It might be that in some cases when there's a new build, it's under a new address, and if it's under a new address, maybe that's why the bill is not getting to the constituents. Or it might be that just people paid their taxes, and so they're just not expecting that mid-year bill, and that's where the issue is coming from. It's going to be a lot easier with the new revenue system for us to see in one place where everything's at, what's due, and why it's due, and also a lot easier for the residents to log on and see what it is that they owe. So what we saw this year is not any kind of a normal thing that we should expect going forward, in the sense that there was a spike in mid-year bills. Mid-year bills in general are a little bit unusual by their nature, and it is not normal for somebody to get a mid-year bill and find out that they're at risk of going to tax sale immediately. That's not how it's supposed to work. To the extent that anybody experienced that, we're going to figure out why that is and fix it.
Yeah, we need to, because it's going to happen again if we don't. So the other, I mean, we saw this in tax sale. There are some of my colleagues who said that half of the people that they helped were with this particular problem, and this happened, you know, in my district as well. People who pay their taxes regularly, whose mortgage companies did not get the bill. So I think that there was an error somewhere, and we need to resolve that. So I'm hoping, and this will be, Mr. Chair, I have a formal request to ask the Finance Department to get the very specific solution to this issue so that we're not seeing it again next year. And this is the mid-year or part-year tax assessments.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I will just add that we will work with our colleagues in SDAT to start by diagnosing the problem, and then we will absolutely respond with a solution and share that with you formally.
Understood. Thank you. Yes. Well, it's not, it's something that we've got to figure out. So if we want to, I'll give you some time to figure it out, you know, within a month. Okay? Does that sound good?
Well, I can commit to reporting in a month on what we've learned. I think the only reason I'm caveating it like that is because right now we're at a place where we don't yet know what the problem is. So we will work aggressively to diagnose the problem, and as soon as we have that, we can start working on a solution. So we can report our progress to you in a month.
Okay, sure. And then we'll just set regular meeting times to continue the conversation. Okay, thank you very much. My second question is, there's been a lot of conversation, and I'm sure we'll have this conversation when we meet with DHCD next week, about code enforcement and the lack of resources for code enforcement. In the executive summary is this amazing chart, which I have said that I love already many times in the past 4 years, on page 61, that talks about like basically all of the line items for revenues, but code enforcement revenues are not in here. And so, or at least I can't find them. Maybe they're in a line that I don't know. And I also recognize that often when we're doing the citations, they're not paid, which is kind of the whole point of what we did with, raising the fees and understanding that we wanted to get more properties into in-rem. I'm just curious about whether or not there's any way to see what that revenue has been in terms of code enforcement citations paid. I think it's really low, but I'm just curious about it.
We will work to see if we can isolate that for you. Let me just briefly look.
So, Councilwoman, in the executive summary document, we outlined the line item assumptions for all of the revenue sources. The code enforcement revenues that are generated from the code enforcement team show up in different revenue categories.
Right.
For example, environmental citations, but they would fall into some of those different categories. We don't have one category called code enforcement revenue.
Understood.
But what my team can provide is we can provide a list for you of which of the revenue categories that appear in the budget documents are tied to the code enforcement team.
That would be super. And what timeline would you have that?
I would say that we, again, understanding sort of the timeline to vet responses internally, I would say that's something we could provide next week.
Okay, that would be great. So again, Mr. Chair and staff, this would be a formal request to get those revenues outlined relative to environmental citations, sanitary citations, all of that, and what those revenues are within a week, sometime next week, I should say. Thank you.
Got that, Marguerite? Colleagues, any other questions for finance? Yes. Dorsey?
Hi, I wish I weren't asking this because it'll be like my 6th year in a row asking about this. But DOT was supposed to come up with a system for accounting for streetlight damages by Q4, and that hasn't happened. And so I'm going to go back to my original supposition here, is that because this is a question about money being lost or value of city property being lost, that this is something that BBMR should have research on and a clear understanding of. And so Kenton and how will BBMR help us to have a clear understanding of the value of streetlight damages that happen in this city every year? Because by my assessment, last I checked, we were losing about $2.5 million every year in damages to streetlights, and I can't seem to get the Department of Transportation to clearly account for that. And I spent years asking BBMR to account for this because I think that it's the responsibility of BBMR to research and manage that.
Certainly, and that is something that we can continue to explore with our colleagues in the Department of Transportation and work on getting a follow-up for you.
And I just don't even know how to ask for a timeline on this because I've been asking for this for 6 years, and I had a clear commitment that this would be done by now. And so I would like to be able to set a timeline, but I'm at a loss for words as to how to realistically expect that end. So can you give me any sense of what I should expect here?
So this is something, this is something that I could commit to you that we can assign as a summer research project for this summer. So that we could report back to you in the first half of fiscal '25.
Okay, I accept that with the caveat that I've received completely insufficient summaries over the years, and what I'm looking for is for there to be a meaningful way of actually accounting for this in whole. Because not everything that's been done to date has just been woefully insufficient.
So council member, this is what we can commit to. What we can commit to is after the budget process, we will set up a meeting between DOT, BBMR, my office, and you, so we can talk through the contents of the report that you are looking for. And then I will work with BBMR. We will assign it to a BBMR analyst, and we will do our best to come up with projections of the cost of, projections of cost for you.
Can we get that in writing? Because I'm just exhausted from hearing him make this request every single year.
Yeah, so happy to.
Hang on.
Okay.
And hearing the same response from the administration and hearing the same exact response from the administration every single year. So CA Leach, what you just described, can you put that in writing with a time frame that you're committing to and send that to us?
Sure. So like I've done every year that I've been responsible for the budget, I provide a written document to each council member that outlines the administration's commitment. So it will be included in that document.
I know you do that, so thank you, because I get copied on all those letters, so that's great. So please keep doing that. I'm asking for this separately, like not as he gets a letter on the day that we get a budget agreement, and it says in there, we're going to do this thing for you in this upcoming fiscal year, and then it doesn't get done. So can we get something in writing, like on your letterhead or the mayor's?
So the letter that I provide is on official letterhead and is the most official response I can provide to you. So I will include it with a detailed timeline of when we will provide that response to the council member. And what I will also commit to is that prior to providing that letter to you, as well as to the council member and the council president, that we will have a date set up for the initial meeting with Councilmember Dorsey.
Great, so we'll have that in writing before we vote on the budget.
Absolutely.
Something separate that just addresses this one thing. Perfect.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Councilman Dorsey, any other questions?
No, I'll just note that there have been like 4 meetings since we made this commitment last year, and it still hasn't happened. Like, the meetings happened and the results haven't.
Sure is. Councilman Dorsey, if you could please slowly explain your request, just so everyone, council services and the team can properly capture that, please.
Every time a street light is knocked down in Baltimore City, there is a monetary value to the damaged property. The city of Baltimore should not find itself incapable of accounting for that in full. That is for the value of the damaged property and the value of the time spent to collect the damaged property, the personnel expenses associated with managing the collection of that property, and the personnel expenses associated with putting it back up. And that's what I want to know in full, what the value of all of that is. And what I've received repeatedly is an incomplete account of that. And what I want is a complete account of that. And I have repeatedly proposed a very straightforward system operationally for the Department of Transportation to be able to collect that information and account for it on an ongoing basis, and have essentially been entirely rebuffed in my effort to get them to implement a system that would allow them to account for that.
So just to summarize, you want to, not that I haven't summarized this before in years past, you want a methodology for how to determine the cost of damage to these city assets from vehicular accidents, as well as some assessment of what that damage is. Is that correct? Or just button it up for me in 1 to 2 sentences, please. I know there's a lot going on here. 1 to 2 sentences.
Yeah, a point of contention is that the Department of Transportation, when there isn't a police report specifically documenting that it was knocked down by a vehicle, they say, well, we can't 100% know that it was knocked down by a vehicle, so we're not going to attribute it to having been knocked down by a vehicle. And I say, I don't care, essentially, at a point whether you know it was knocked down by a vehicle. You know that it was knocked down. So I want the full value of all streetlights that are damaged, and not at the time when we spend the money to actually do the replacement, because that's a whole other process problem, because we're not replacing like 80% of the ones that get knocked down in the city. I want the damage value accounted for at the time when it gets knocked down.
Okay, and I don't mean to belabor this.
Yeah.
That's very helpful context. Wrap that up for me in 1 sentence, please, so we can make sure we capture this, so that we have done our due diligence to try and get you your request.
I want a system put in place on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis to account for the full value of time and materials, all inclusive, related to all aspects of street lighting damages in the city.
Thank you. Marguerite, you got that? Faith, any questions?
So not to belabor the point, a couple of points of clarification and also acknowledgement that the administration has provided research to the council member. I think what we want to be able to do is ensure that we, as requested by the council member, provide a fulsome accounting of all the streetlight damages as per the council member's request. But I did want to acknowledge that there has been work that has been done around this commitment, but we want to ensure that we are 100% responsive to your requests. And so, council member, I will work directly with you, but I do want to be clear about one thing. So what I just heard was a request for a system. Prior to that, what I heard was research. So is it a request for a new system to be put in place, or is it request for research on damages?
There needs to be a system, because there's no way
Okay.
to do the research without a system.
Got it. Received.
Everyone's square here on this one? Any questions, clarification, anything on this request?
Is this request coming to all the council members?
Well, all the submissions from the administration will be provided to everyone. There's a SharePoint folder, and
Okay.
it'll be itemized with a list, which
Okay.
agency who asked for it, yeah. So
Thank you.
will be addressed to Councilman Dorsey. Everyone on the council will see it.
Thank you, because I'm sure we all have similar problems within, broken street lamps, just ones that aren't electrically working properly. It's a citywide concern. So just for that clarity, thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues, any other questions? Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am aware of the time here. I have not seen in the budget, it's entirely possible that I missed it. The city's plan for reducing vacants includes a lot of borrowing. And so I wondered where in the budget we're seeing the debt service and the increase in debt service as a result. To be clear, I've been a huge fan of this, and I'm excited about it. I just want to make sure that I and our colleagues understand, how the IDA bonds are going to work and the debt service that will be needed, because I can't see that here.
So debt service.
Absolutely, and thank you. In the fiscal year 25 budget that's in front of you, you won't see any expenses because there are none at this stage. The next round of what's going to happen is work on the tax increment financing, the TIFs. The TIFs, the way they're designed, also don't flow directly through the debt service budget. The TIFs will be repaid with the tax increment from the
That will
properties.
come
Yeah.
before us, and so I know that we'll have a
That's
full
right.
explanation of it at the time. I'm curious about the other pieces.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the work through the IDA is still in the design stages. We have reauthorized the charter of the IDA at the state level, but we don't have a board for it yet. And once that board is together, we'll begin working with you. And I'm very happy to brief you further on this. I know we have a meeting set up on what those next steps with the IDA look like. So the IDA will be down the road. Any debt service from that is going to be reflected in future budgets. It may be fiscal 26, or it may be even further down the road. But
Okay,
we'll work
thank
with you
you.
on that.
Thank you. That's probably why I didn't see it. Okay, thanks a lot. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Colleagues, any other questions for finance? Okay, we are. Yep, Conway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to give CA Leach an opportunity to provide further update on the procurement charter amendment. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that question, Council Member. So the administration actually has submitted the procurement threshold bill to the council. We are working with the council president, who wanted additional analysis before introducing the bill.
Mr. Chair, just a real quick question on that.
Ramos.
So I heard two things earlier. It's the thresholds and potentially removing procurement regulations and law out of the charter and into ordinance. Is that correct?
Yes.
And this issue that I think all of us have talked about relative to best value versus lowest bid, would that be in that set of items that would be taken out of the charter and put into the ordinance phase? So we're not going to be doing a charter amendment relative to best value versus, right now the charter says lowest bid. So that, I'm curious about that.
Yes, that would be updated as a part of our procurement regulations.
So in taking out, just to be clear, in taking out that whole section of the charter relative to procurement and putting it in ordinance and regulation, that will be addressed?
Yes.
Thank you.
Colleagues, any other questions for finance? Okay, we're now in recess till 11 a.m. for Mayor's Office of Infrastructure Development.
Thank you.